And friends, welcome once again to Concert Conversations, a wonderful program underwritten with support from Chris Connolly and Wells Fargo Advisors. Our guest, as ever, the one and only Maestro Mark Russell Smith, music director of the Quad City Symphony Orchestra. Maestro Smith, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And we have another great concert for November coming up, our Masterworks II themed Midsummer Night's Dream. I'll let folks figure out how that name came to be for this concert. But you are mobilizing a lot of great resources here for this concert. You've got some wonderful folks from our community who will be joining you in all sorts of different ways. So I'm going to start with when you have a concert, and we're going to get to the music, of course, that has a lot of great music, but also has a lot of great logistical demands. How do you manage those tracks simultaneously in your mind as the orchestrator of it all?
Well, I mean, with a lot of careful planning. I mean, we started in the summer having meetings about how this program's going to go, and or even actually last season, we're talking to our actors and the Quad City Ballet, and just kind of seeing, when you're co-creating, we're collaborating, and so I'm not dictating what the choreography is, and I'm not even, I kind of want to offer, the fantastic music of Mendelssohn, and of course, excuse me, the story of that Shakespeare wrote, but like, what scene should we have dialogue? Where should we have dance? And so because we're not presenting the whole play. I mean, this music by Mendelssohn was written as incidental music for the entire play, and we're not doing that. And so we pick and choose. And so how to create a narrative, how to, some music is frankly just written for the play. And so if you're not doing the scene, then it just doesn't make sense to do, So anyway, so there's just a lot of collaborating and a lot of listening and tweaking that we have to do before, we even start marking the parts or studying the score.
Well, let's get into the program then and build our way towards it. We open with some wonderful Shakespeare, but something that many of us may not be familiar with, and that is we'll be hearing excerpts from David Diamond's music for Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. How did this
David Diamond is a great 20th century American composer. Very lyrical, very, was kind of, was a conservative composer compared to, the 12-tone guys or the serial composers that were very active during his time. And so he very intentionally decided, he's going to base it in traditional harmony and have melodies. And so, he was a throwback in that way, kind of in the vein of, Aaron Copland or the later Aaron Copland, where it's, tonally based and not serial based. So he created, actually, for not a huge orchestra, but incidental music to Romeo and Juliet. I don't know exactly what production, but it was, music for use. And so, that story, of course, has inspired so many composers. And this was music written for the play, for actors. And so I thought that was a great, and it's unknown. It's really kind of an unknown American gem. And so obviously to couple that with another Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream, was what I like to do is find tangents, find commonalities, and then bring pieces that I feel like are undervalued or just not well known that fit in the scheme of things. And so here's a perfect example of that. And it's beautiful, tuneful music. I think probably QCSO players have it's so rarely done, and so it'll be nice for the audience and for the orchestra to learn a new piece that's, I think, of great value.
And one of the things I've always appreciated about Romeo and Juliet is that it seems like generations get to have their own. I mean, when I was younger, it was a Zeffirelli film, and your ninth grade English teacher showed that and strategically stood in front of the projector at the moment when there was a flash. Just leave that there. And then decades later, there's another one, and then a decade goes by, and there's another one. But the story itself is timeless. So I'm really
and West Side Story,
exactly
right.
That's exactly it. And then even it has now gotten another life, which is exciting to see. So fun. Okay, so that's David Diamond. But here's someone else that I'm really not familiar with, Reena Esmail,
Right.
and a work called Testament. Tell us about this.
Well, it's she's a wonderful composer, Indian origin, American, and American slash East Indian.
Yeah.
So this is an overture. So there's an overture and then there's a tabla piece. And so the idea of music that tells stories, or that underscores stories, which is what happens with, Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet. And I want, again, voices that aren't often heard in the concert hall. And so Reena Esmail she's her Chicago Symphony. I mean, she's playing all over. So it was a very popular composer, a wonderful personality, really colorful. One of the pieces has tabla in it. The other piece she written very specifically in the vein as an overture, kind of like the Mozart overture that we had in Masterworks I, very much like that. So kind of light and peppy and written very specifically as a concert opener. So just a new voice for the QCSO. And for me, frankly, I've never done either of these two pieces. And, to have the interesting colors of the tabla and there's some theater involved with Andrew Parker, who was our soloist from Masterworks I. You'll see some visuals. I mean, there are all sorts of interesting things that are incorporated in these pieces that will, again, you never know what you're going to get with a QCSO, with a Masterworks. And so yet again, that's the case.
Well, I love it. And I think it is confidently predicted that this is the first time we've had tabla during a Masterworks performance, which will be great. Do you know, I mean, I know we have an artist coming to perform.
Right. And I mean, tablas are improvised, basically. I mean, there's no, like, the way one learns tabla is by rote. And so like your teacher actually verbalizes a rhythmic pattern, and then the tabla player, imitates that. And so there's a whole beautiful rigor and structure about how it's learned, but there's no notation. And so when you write for tabla, the tabla player is improvising, basically. And so that's an interesting wrinkle. And of course you have to, so he knows this piece already. I think he's performed it a few times. But then there's miking, because tablas they're not that loud to be heard anyway. So there are all sorts of, to make it work for a Western orchestra in a big hall like Adler or Centennial, there are things that we have to do. And so, that's par for the course, and that's great. And so it's just, again, something a little bit out of the ordinary for our listeners and for the orchestra as well.
Many years ago, Augustana had a koto ensemble that had a special relationship with a koto academy in Japan, and I used to love those concerts. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this instrument on these stages of my hometown. That'll be great. And thank you for introducing us to this music. But I want to thank you too for lifting up one of my all-time favorite works. And I don't care how you slice or dice it, any excerpting from Midsummer Night's Traum is fine for me. But there's a great backstory to this. I mean, Mendelssohn was pretty young when he was first exposed to the magic of Shakespeare, but he decided pretty quickly that he had to do something with it.
Right.
So his family.
So what came first was the overture, and so I think when he was 16, I mean, he was just a prodigiously talented kid. And when he was 16, I think the German translation just came out of Midsummer Night's Dream. And so he, of course, from an erudite, artistically inclined family, went to go see it and, was just, totally inspired. And so he sat down to write the overture, which is a masterwork already as a 16-year-old. And so that existed for a while. And then it wasn't until later on, like maybe even 10 years later or something, there was a new production that needed other music to it. And so the overture was first as like just a brilliant outpouring of a teenager. And then the rest of the music came that was more, follow the scenario, follow the scenes and painted in between things and some of the dialogues and put the scherzo in. And so, I mean, the super evocative music in the same spirit as the overture, but a more mature composer writing it. And so, it's music that I've loved for a long time. It's music of the theater. It's music that certainly ballet, Balanchine choreographed it and added some other music to it to make it a full evening. It's my favorite Shakespeare play, to be honest. And so the music is magical, and you just don't. You have to create opportunities for all of it to be heard. I mean, there's the wedding march we always hear, the scherzo sometimes, but there's so many things that we don't hear of this brilliant music that you just. It's been on my list for a long time to figure out a way to bring it to the Quad Cities. I did it when I was the music director in Richmond. We did a whole full evening ballet and with actors, and it was something similar to what we're doing now.
Well,
Not quite the same, but the music was just magical.
Well, yeah, and we're going to come back to music, but let's talk a little bit about what we're doing this time. You have enlisted Ballet Quad Cities will be part of this, the Augustana Choir and Choral Artists. So Ballet Quad Cities choreographer Courtney Lyon, John Hurdy, director of the Choir and Choral Arts.
Right, women, just the women. It's just for women.
Okay, all right. And then one of my favorite voices, Shelley Cooper, someone I'm not as familiar with, Doug Kutzley, but we're going to have this wonderful pooling of our community's talent, and you're going to put it all together. I can't wait to see how the ballet is going to fit on the stage.
Well, and it's not the full company because we can't fit them all on stage, but and we're still, it will take us a while to figure that out exactly where they're going to be. And we don't get to rehearse in Centennial, so how's that going to work? And I mean, those are all the kind of logistic things that our audience shouldn't care about. That's our problem, but we always manage to overcome these challenges. But yeah, I mean, it's fun to obviously we have such a talented community, and to have an umbrella big enough, which is Midsummer Night's Dream, where all these disparate forces can come together, actors and choir singers and soloists and dancers, and of course the great orchestra. It'll be a big deal. It'll be a really big deal.
Well, and you mentioned this, your personal affinity for this one. I got to tell you that the better part of 4 decades ago, I was Demetrius in a production, one of the 4 lovers, at Genesius Guild in Rock Island's Lincoln Park, where a legendary figure in local theater, a guy named Jim Lula, who had a voice deeper than the Grand Canyon, played Bottom. And even in a mask, that guy could give his lines and be heard through the whole park. And so it's one of my favorites too. And that's why I love this music, is that it works hand in hand with that evocation of being in a magical wood.
Right.
Now, I will say I prefer the version of the story with Mendelssohn that his father purchased the translation, simply the print translation of the works of Shakespeare, so that he started formulating his overture before he'd even seen it staged. He read the words in German, the magic of Shakespeare translated to German, and the wonderful eternal magic of the story. And I like to think of it that way, because I do think Mendelssohn is one of the greatest geniuses. If you just think of sheer unadulterated genius of all the people you and I get to talk about.
Right. He's right up there. I mean, there's Mozart too, but
well,
yeah.
No, absolutely. And that goes almost without saying, and I shouldn't let it go without saying. But there's
absolutely. I totally agree. Mendelssohn is, and again, not somebody who, like, unlike Beethoven or like Stravinsky, pushed the envelope as far as evolution or shaking your fist at the establishment or whatever. I mean, his music has elegance. His music has great expressiveness. Yeah, I mean, and then he's caught as a Jew who then had to become Christian in order to survive in the world at that time, and that kind of conflict. But then writing stuff like Elijah, super meaningful. Anyway, just a brilliant guy from a brilliant family. I mean, Moses Mendelssohn, the philosopher. Yeah. I mean, the whole milieu for him is pretty amazing.
Well, the irony there that he tried to change, and his family tried to change their identity, but of course, during the Hitler time, it didn't work. And so for a while, they were trying to get rid of his music. What I find is the lovely postscript to that story is that it didn't work, is that they couldn't deny the brilliance of the music. And sure, it didn't get performed, but there was no way that the legacy of Mendelssohn was going to die.
Right.
There was
Right.
never in any risk of that. And I think you and I have spoken about it, about going to the Mendelssohn House Museum in Leipzig. I think you've
Right.
been there too.
I have.
Uh, but that's a part of his legacy I wanted to touch with you, is that he really helped to shape what the modern job of a conductor is. Is that not so?
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, founding the Gewandhaus and one of the first modern conductors and music directors and musical leaders of a town. Yeah, I mean that he took it upon himself for sure, and was great. Was tremendous at that.
Well, one other thing about this dreamlike aspect of this, and I'm so grateful for everything you're bringing together, but we maybe don't appreciate the way that Shakespeare did, and possibly the people who grew up at the time of Mendelssohn, is that there was real magic associated with Midsummer's Night.
Right.
And even in Scandinavia to this day, people weave a wreath of a prescribed number of flowers because your dream that night is very powerful. The dream you have on Midsummer's Night, the legend is, will tell you the person that you will spend your life with, for instance, or other things like that. But the connection of dreaminess and Midsummer is great. And yeah, it's wonderful whenever we get to hear it. And I think it's going to be great to hear it even in November.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. I mean, yeah, the timing of that is just what it is. You know, what can I say? So, right.
Well, no, we'll bring you back.
Because we don't play in Midsummer, so there you go.
Well, we can set you up in Lincoln Park and Rock Island. We
Right.
could make
Yeah.
it work. I'm sure that we could. So, I just do want to touch on that logistics, because I hope our audience appreciates how much work goes into any Masterworks. But when you've got to deal with all the logistics around all of these folks, um, everyone's got to come with their A game, and that's what we
Right.
come to expect from the Quad City Symphony Orchestra.
Well, and I think, look, I mean, all modesty aside, I mean, we are one of the leaders of the Quad Cities art scene. I mean, without question. And so when other artists collaborate with us, I mean, they bring their A game. I mean, they think, we're orchestra functions on a very, very high level. And so, the artists we ask are people who do that and who have the capability of doing that, and and so to be able to inspire others is great. To set a high bar is great, and yeah, I mean, we don't apologize for that at all, and that's what our audience expects, I think.
Well, you've brought us a wonderful Masterworks 1. We're really looking forward to Masterworks 2. And remember, friends, if you don't have your tickets, to go to qcso.org. You can hear it November 2nd. I should say you can experience it. Saturday, November 2nd, 7:30 p.m. in the Adler Theater, or the following Sunday, November 3rd, 2 p.m. at Centennial Hall. Maestro, any last words before we let you get ready for the
No, it's just, it's yet again, I think, just, Masterworks 1 was a huge romantic symphony, a big statement, and Masterworks 2 is like the opposite of that. It's very theatrical based, very colorful, so it's, again, you just never know what to expect, and that's, of course, by design. And I think it celebrates the great versatility of orchestral music, and just how many different avenues you can explore if you love classical music and you love the QCSO. So it's just a fun for us to do Masterworks 1, different kind of fun for us to do Masterworks 2, and that's we're lucky to be able to do that.
I will amend your comment in just one way. There is one thing that we all know we can expect, and that is a wonderful experience, not just auditory, but entirely. It's a great experience whenever you take the stage with our amazing orchestra. So on behalf of everybody watching, and on behalf of everyone who's going to be there for the big weekend concerts, Maestro, thank you very much.
Thank you. A pleasure. See you next time.
Thank you.